thank you so much for watching my YouTube channel. Have you subscribed yet? Oh, of course. That's an automatic. If you haven't, please subscribe right now, because this is a really, really great channel. And I say that because I know God helps you and encourages you. And I love that we're short, but also meaningful and helpful in your life. And we're wrapping up our series today called Live Big. I want to live a big life. I don't want to live a small, irrelevant, insignificant life. I want to live big. But how do we live big? And we've talked about some different ways. And the key thing to living big is exalting God. And I talked about a quarter. If you take a quarter and you hold it up to the sun, you can literally block out the sun just with the size of a quarter. And you and I, we both know a quarter is not nearly as big as the sun. Like, seriously, that's ridiculous. But the same principle applies with our problems. Sometimes we look at our problems and they seem so big. But in reality, God is always bigger than our problems. We know that in our better moments. But sometimes we let our problems turn into the quarter that blocks out the sun, or blocks out the bigness, the immensity of God. And God is bigger. God is bigger than any problem that you know or you have. God is bigger than a financial issue. You might have lost your job, and you might be concerned about that. You might have some health concerns. You might have some things going on in your family or work relationships that are a struggle. But God, I want to just encourage you, God is bigger. God is bigger than whatever the problem is. Let's take the quarter away, take the problem away, and let's exalt God. Let's magnify God. We talked about Mary, the first one. She magnified the Lord. Her soul magnified the Lord. We talked about Jehoshaphat, how he put worshipers in front of his army. And by worshiping God, the enemy in front of him was dispelled. We talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego last week, that they chose not to worship the idol or worship the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, but they exalted God. And Jesus walked in the furnace with them and delivered them, brought them out without even a smell of smoke on any of their clothes or their hair. And today I want to encourage you, this is really important. This is from Psalms 135. And when you look at verses 15 to 18, it's really fascinating. I've read this. In fact, I read it recently, and it always catches my attention. Because the psalmist here is talking about idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of man's hand. They have mouths, but they don't speak. They have eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. Is there any breath at all in their mouths? And sometimes maybe we don't do it on purpose, but sometimes we let our problems turn into idols. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, we focus on them. We pay attention to them. I remember back in April when we did the shelter at home. In Colorado, we had the shelter at home mandate. And we all had to stay at home and work from home. And for a little bit, some days in there, it was a fixation for me. I was looking at the numbers, the COVID numbers, and reading all the news. I was watching it very, very consistently. And what happened is I started to fixate on that. And I started finding myself anxious and upset and nervous, uptight, a little afraid. And what happened is I started focusing and magnifying that because of my attention. And what it says here is when we exalt and we magnify and worship, so to speak, an idol, it says in verse 18, those who make them will be like them. And the principle is this: you become like what you worship. I think it's really important. And I feel like this is super significant for you to consider and reflect and absorb in your heart. Whatever you worship is what you become like. And for me, I can see in myself, when I exalt or magnify, I focus, fixate, and really let my attention just default, whatever it is. If it's not Jesus, then I become anxious. And it's like I get fixated, and that's all I think about, all I talk about, I'm absorbed in, whatever it is. But when we worship God, we become like God because we're made in the image of God. We're made to reflect God. And when we look at our problems and we magnify our problems and we put that little quarter in front of the sun, family, we're not meant to be small. We're not meant to live this insignificant, tiny, fearful, anxious, worrisome life. We're meant to exalt God. to let God be big in us as well as big through us. Because whatever we worship, we become like what we worship. So my challenge to you as we finish up this series is, let's make the decision, and not just one time, but let's make this a fresh decision on a regular basis, that we will magnify God. That God, we know God is bigger, but let's choose in our actions. Let's choose with our focus. Let's choose. And that can be in a lot of ways. You can magnify God. You can magnify God. Create a playlist on your phone or in Spotify that's like, hey, this is going to exalt God. Hey, I'm going to put some Bible verses in my car as I'm driving. I'm going to make that like a Bible verse on my screen, on my home screen when my phone comes open. I'm going to put whatever it is that helps us exalt and magnify and let God be big. Then let's do things that help us exalt God. We know God is big, but it helps us in our hearts to acknowledge the immensity of God, that God is all powerful, God is all knowing, God is all present. And when we magnify and we exalt God, then that's our natural. That's how we're designed. We're designed to do that. And that is a key for us to live big, to be the person God has made us to be. It happens in part because we exalt God and we minimize the problem and magnify the Lord. So I invite you today, let's make that decision. Let's magnify the Lord. Let's worship God. And as we finish, I just ask you this question. Maybe leave it in your feedback here. What's an easy way for you to magnify God? Do you like that idea of a home screen? Do you like that idea of a playlist? Or maybe you have your own idea, and that would be fantastic. You create a solution. Just list there in the feedback, how do you magnify the Lord? What's a great way, an easy way, or a creative way for you to magnify God? So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your feedback. Of course, I want to thank you for subscribing. Of course, you could share this with a friend. We're going to start a new series next week, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because you have to watch to find out. And here's your concluding joke. Did you hear about the guy whose whole left side was cut off? He's all right now. All right. I know, super cheesy, but next week will be way better. Thanks again for watching.